This is what a key looks like to my $25,000 motorcycle. $25,000 is a lot for a motorcycle, but we're not gonna be looking at those types of motorcycles today. What are we looking at today, Bennett?
Beginner bikes.
And of course we have to do another road trip, about an hour and 30 minutes away from home. Why are we going this far to go to a motorcycle dealership? You guys are gonna find out. And just like that, we have made it to the largest motorcycle mall in the entire state. And what you're seeing right here, this is literally the size of the motorcycle dealership. They have Ducatis, they have Indians, they have Kawasaki, Honda, pretty much every single brand that you could possibly imagine for motorcycles, they have it. Obviously, this dealership is massive and we have a lot to get to today, but the first bike I wanted to bring attention to is not a normal beginner bike that a lot of people pay attention to. This is Aprilia's RS457, and Bennett is currently sitting on this bike. Now, the reason I'm using Bennett today is because he hasn't bought a motorcycle in a long time. He hasn't ridden in a very long time, and so this is kind of his reintroduction to sport bikes. Since he didn't get to spend that much time on his last motorcycles before his mom unfortunately made him sell them, he's going to be my surrogate today in finding out what is going to be the best beginner bike and what our personal recommendations are going to be for them. So Aprilia's RS457, this bike starts out at $6,799. Kind of expensive for a beginner bike, wouldn't you say, Bennett?
Yeah, I would say so.
A little bit. The benefit to that is you're getting right side up forks. You're getting a lot of things that you find on much more expensive motorcycles, like that nice aluminum frame and a little bit of that Italian flavor.
I think it's a great beginner bike, personally. Small CC, cheaper to insure.
The only problem that you might have with this bike is, unfortunately, that price. $7,000 for a brand new motorcycle. I already can tell there's just gonna be people clicking away from this video. Oh my God, that's way too expensive. But we're gonna talk about that later in the video. So random sequence of the vlog. This is Wyatt. He came up and said hi, which was like super cool.
I saw him just by motorcycles and was like, it's him.
So Wyatt, how long have you been riding?
About a year.
So what was your first bike, your first street bike?
ZX4RR, it's amazing. Spark Black as well. It's a really good beginner bike.
How long have you been riding dirt before hopping on the street?
Dirt, about 6 years, but I've been only limited to about a YZ80, and I'm about like 160 pounds, so that I bog it down quite a lot.
Because these are not cheap beginner bikes. They are a little bit pricey, but what you're paying for on that bike, it's an inline four. You get 4 cylinders, so it makes that inline four sound. So would I recommend this bike for somebody who has never ridden a motorcycle before? Probably not, but you have been riding for a little bit before hopping on the street, so that's a little bit different. So thank you again to the lovely Wyatt over there. This is Kawasaki's Ninja 500, listed for $5,899. A bike like this is going to be a lot better on gas. It's going to be a lot cheaper to insure. The downside to this bike compared to the Aprilia that we were looking at, this comes with a steel frame, a steel swing arm, comes with right side up forks, so it's going to be worse handling. It's probably going to be a little bit heavier, but the benefit is it is going to be a lot cheaper. Things like the clutch are going to be a lot lighter. I can literally pull this with my pinky. Super light clutch. It's also super low to the ground. Bennett, how tall are you?
5'9" 3/4".
And you are very easily flat-footing that bike with a bend to your knees. So
it's also super easy to move back and forth in your garage or whatnot, which can sometimes be an issue.
The only downside is going to be the character of this bike. Unfortunately, I've had a little bit of experience with riding this bike. One of my good friends owns one of these things, and the problem is the engine sound. It is a 180-degree parallel twin. I'm gonna go ahead and play a sound clip. These things are not, yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, the sound on these bikes are not phenomenal, but that's not the reason why you buy these bikes. You buy this bike as a first bike. You buy it to get it, lay it down on the ground, have a lot of fun with your friends, and then upgrade to a bigger bike. I just wanted to bring a point up to this bike because it is a brand new 2025. The new wings make this bike look fire.
No pun intended.
Only problem is this bike is 29 bandos, dude. Probably out of the realm of a possibility of a beginner, because the last thing you want to do is buy a brand new shiny Honda Fireblade and then crash it in the parking lot because you don't know what you're doing. Can someone start on a bike like this? If you have money like that and don't care, but I don't know anybody who does. I love motorcycles, but even I would probably be like, probably not. And if you want to be a grandpa, you could be like Bennett here with the Grandpa Goldwing. I guess if you want to buy a motorcycle, but you also want to buy a car at the same time, I suppose that this would be a phenomenal option for that.
It's
I just
automatic
can't imagine
too.
having a lot of fun with your friends on sport bikes on something like this. But for the older viewers of the page, there you go. Got the Honda Goldwing right there.
All 5 of them.
Next up is going to be the Honda CB300. This is basically going to be the Grom's bigger brother. This bike is listed for $5,100. Definitely on the cheaper side, but the downside is it is only a 1-cylinder motorcycle, which is why I call it the Grom's bigger brother.
It really just feels like a Grom right over there for a larger scale human, like a full-size man. So you're not in a little ball.
I believe that these top out, I think, at 85 miles an hour, so definitely something that just to be aware of on the freeway.
No.
Definitely not a bike to keep up with your 1000cc buddies. So the Honda Grom also suffers from this problem a little bit. A lot of people get into Groms as thinking that they're like a first bike because they're so cheap. I mean, this bike is $4,800 brand new, and you can find these bikes for $3,000 on Marketplace all day. The downside of the Grom is going to be really cheap parts, and the fact that these bikes top out, I think, at 60 miles an hour. Definitely not safe to take on the freeway. It's going to be more of a side road bike, and unfortunately, because it's so small, I don't think that these actually serve as good beginner bikes. Meanwhile, something like the CB300 actually could be treated like a true beginner bike, simply for the fact that you can actually take them on the freeway. And for only about $300 more, you can get way more speed, way more torque, and it's going to be a way better option if you're looking at something like a Grom. Next up for Bennett, we have the duality of man here. We have the Yamaha R7 versus the Yamaha NTO7, the sport bike and the little brother to the sport bike, which are basically the exact same thing. Both of these bikes, for all intents and purposes, basically have the exact same frame, the exact same motor, exact same clutch feel, exact same top speed, exact same feel, pretty much everything. The cool thing being is I actually own a Yamaha NTO7 as part of a bike in my lineup, which should probably tell you something, that these bikes can be a lot of fun. What I love about Yamaha's CP2 motor is even though these bikes are considered slow by most like leader bike standards and like compared to my H2 and my V4, these bikes are incredibly slow. They're still full of a ton of character, and even somebody who's advanced can enjoy these bikes, while someone like a beginner can start out in one of these bikes and be just fine. The downside being is, of course, going to be the price on these motorcycles. This is a 2024 R7. This bike goes for $9,000. It's pretty close to the range of that Kawasaki ZX4RR, but you're getting a lot more torque and a lot skinnier of a motorcycle. This Yamaha NTO7 with the exact same motor goes for almost $1,000 cheaper with a price tag of $8,199. I'm going to give a little bit of my personal recommendation when it comes to these bikes, and I think the Yamaha NTO7 is going to be a lot better of a beginner bike compared to the R7. I know, crazy opinion. The MT-07 is going to be a lot easier to work on. Meanwhile, with the R7, to do something like an oil change, you have to remove a bunch of fairings. The MT-07 is also going to be a lot more comfortable and probably teach you a lot more about riding a motorcycle than the R7. While the R7, I think, is going to be a much better bike on track. If you plan on buying a bike and then immediately taking it on track, the R7 is probably going to be your choice. But for somebody who just wants to do daily riding, you know, ride to work, ride with your friends, take a girl out for a ride, the MT-07 is going to be a lot better of a bike. And a lot cheaper, not to mention. Of course, money, right?
Money.
Money. So when I'm talking about all these motorcycles, price is something that I want to bring up. Obviously, I spend a lot of money when it comes to these motorcycles, but I'm not the common person. I spend a lot of money on my motorcycles because I love them, and I also make videos with them, a little bit different than somebody who's just getting the bikes and wants to spend the least amount of money possible. I want you guys to get the best motorcycle for the least amount of money, so that's why I try to talk about this stuff with that context. Next up on my list is going to be the Yamaha R3. So this bike is unfortunately sold, so we cannot sit on this one. Of course, trying to be respectful to the person who actually bought this bike. I wouldn't want someone sitting on my brand new motorcycle, so I'm not going to do that here. But the reason I wanted to bring up this bike is because this is brand new for 2025. Yamaha updated this bike, kind of made it look like the new R9, but underneath this bike is still the exact same that has been being made for forever now. Now, what a lot of people don't know is I actually owned a Yamaha R3 a few years ago. I owned that bike for about 2 months after owning my MT-09. Again, it's probably gonna be a little bit telling about how I felt about that bike. This is unfortunately going to be a bike that I'm gonna put into a category of it's a good beginner bike, but I don't think it's a good forever bike. I went from a bike with 120 horsepower to this bike, which I think has about 48 horsepower, and so I lost a lot of that excitement, a lot of that character that I had from my previous bike, and I didn't quite find it on this one. But when looking at this bike, Bennett, it's a little bit flashy, right?
Oh yeah, super flashy. It's got a sport look.
It has like a little bit of that leader bike presence, a little bit of that R1, R9 presence. It looks dope. The headlight in the middle, which is probably a good thing because it doesn't actually have a ram air intake. It doesn't need that. This is a parallel twin, a 180-degree parallel twin. Let's get a sound clip for that real quick. So again, it's gonna be another one of those bikes that you probably wanna keep the stock exhaust on. Super flashy, super cool looking bike. But again, probably gonna be a bike that you just wanna buy as a beginner bike and then upgrade into something in the future. Next up, this is not a full fairing sport bike, so I imagine a lot of people are gonna be clicking away right now, but this is Ducati's Hyper Motard 698. This is a bike I actually own. This is Ducati's closest bike that they have to a beginner motorcycle. This is their cheapest bike, which I understand for saying a Ducati being cheap. I'm gonna hate to say this, but not necessarily that cheap, $16,000. This one's decked out with a little bit of modifications though, which jacks that price up a little bit. So we're talking exhaust, seat, fender, eliminator. These bikes are super customizable. So the thing is with these bikes, they're super tall.
Yeah,
this is
I'm not tall.
Basically a giant supermoto. Oh my God, good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah, it's like when I rode yours. I was
You
like,
have a little bit of experience with riding with this bike. I'm going to probably recommend, this is going to go into my category of like beginner bikes. That is not a beginner bike. This is not a beginner's motorcycle, unfortunately. Like, you would probably be better off starting on like something like a Monster before something like this. But unfortunately, because it's the cheapest Ducati that you could buy, I have to include it in today's list. Because I own one of these motorcycles, I know what the riding characteristic is like. It's like a leader bike. You have to ride it in a certain riding style that is completely foreign to any other type of typical normal motorcycle. He ended up stalling it like, how many times?
Okay, once, and it was like 5 minutes after I left your house. I sold it once in like a 20-minute ride. It was fine.
He had a couple of problems with it, but
it was fine.
It was weird, right? It was
100%.
unfamiliar. So that's why it's like kind of like the Grom, which I hate comparing this bike to a Grom because it's way more powerful, has like way more character. It's just a bike that's not going to teach you about motorcycles. It's so much different that it's not going to teach you enough about like riding a 600 or a 1000. And look at this, we have the key to the 698. Let's get a little sound clip, friend. That's way louder than mine.
Way louder.
I'm shocked, bro. What the? I thought, because I can still see it has a little bit of a muffler box down there. No, maybe not. That's crazy. So it still has the catalytic converter.
Has a cat in it.
But it's that loud. That's crazy.
Jeez.
Cool. Next up, oh my God.
Please add that in.
Next up is going to be the Daytona 660. This is from a very different brand that honestly doesn't get enough attention, but this is Triumph. This bike is a 3-cylinder. It's different from any of the other beginner bikes that we've looked at today. This bike is going to be priced a little bit higher up, $9,320. Definitely approaching that ZX4RR, a little bit more than a Yamaha R7, but you are getting a bonus little cylinder in there. Nice, really high quality feeling parts, really nice paint in person. That's another thing that we have to talk about. Triumph has always been known for making really high quality motorcycles, but for a premium, you have to pay a little bit more money. But I'm gonna give a little bit of my personal recommendation, and this is really expensive for a beginner bike. And unfortunately, this bike has only been out for about a year, and so finding these bikes used, basically impossible. I love Triumph to death, but there's reasons why I don't have a Triumph in my current lineup right now. That's mainly because they're expensive, hard to find parts for, and really hard to find on the used market. If you have to buy a brand new used motorcycle that you want to take on track and ride everywhere that you go, this is probably not the worst option in the world, but unfortunately with that price tag, it's just something you have to be aware of. If you got it like that, hey, more power to you.
Send it, man.
Yeah, I mean, do whatever you want, but for people out there who want to save a little bit of money, there's better options.
There's better options, yeah.
So this is a great example of why you want to buy a used motorcycle compared to a new one. This used Yamaha MT-07 is going for $65.99 at a dealership, which dealerships are usually going to mark them up a little bit, but here's a brand new one for $8,100. They are literally the exact same motorcycle. This one obviously just has halogens and probably a few miles on it, but you're paying $2,000 less for a used motorcycle. Like, you could choose to buy this, or for the same price, get that RS457. Yeah, you're getting a brand new motorcycle with a warranty, but with a used Japanese bike, you don't need a warranty, bro. You can buy something like this and save a crap ton of money, which is why I always tell people, get the bike that you can afford. You wouldn't believe our luck. We found one of the best beginner bikes, literally, of all time. This is the Kawasaki ZX-10 RR. Very expensive for a beginner bike, but to be honest with you, I think it's worth it for having one of the best beginner bikes that has ever been made, right? See, the ZX-10 regular R, that's too dangerous for a normal beginner rider, but you never hear people talking about the ZX-10 RR. That's because that's the beginner bike that nobody else wants you to know about.
Double safety rating, in case you didn't know that.
That's what that RR stands for.
Yes, double safety
for,
rating.
Repair ready. So out of all the beginner bikes that we looked at today, what was your favorite?
The R7.
The Yamaha R7. Why do you say that?
The looks, mainly. If you throw a full or a 3/4 exhaust on this thing, it sounds absolutely great compared to the other beginner bikes.
Only downside is going to be the price, so I'm going to highly recommend if you look at an R7, look for a used one. They're out there, especially with the R9 coming out. There's going to be a lot of people selling their R7s. Definitely a good time to buy. The R7 also lacks a lot of features that you don't necessarily need on a brand new motorcycle. There's no traction control, there's no wheelie control. A lot of those things are just going to get in your way when you're trying to get into motorcycles. And the less technology that you have, the more educated you're going to be about these bikes. Of course, a beginner bike video wouldn't be complete without shopping for a little bit of motorcycle gear. Now, to be a little bit controversial, you don't need to spend this much money when buying your first helmet. Obviously, a helmet is something you want to spend a decent amount of money on because it's protecting your brain, and your brain is incredibly important. You don't need to spend this type of money to protect your skull. I really enjoy these like middleweight type helmets, these like $500 to $600 range. Shoei is a great option. I use Shoei in a lot of my videos. Yes, the RF1400 is a great helmet. The AGV K3, a lot of these helmets, even though they go up in price, all have the exact same safety rating. So despite the fact you're spending $200 or $500, you might be getting
maintaining the exact same safety ratings.
Hopefully we learned a lot and got to show you guys a lot of different beginner bikes, because it's been a while since I've had experience with those things, which is a shame because beginner bikes are everybody's first introduction to motorcycles, or at least should be. I show a lot of really flashy bikes on this page, and I worry that that gets people the wrong message when getting into motorcycles. They're really cool, but they're not like cars because, unfortunately, dangerous hobby. You shouldn't just get the most expensive bike when getting into bikes.
Oh, feels good to sit down.
Anyway, I'm gonna end today's video here. I hope that you guys learned a lot when it comes to motorcycles today, especially when it comes to beginner bikes. And I hope you guys just make smart choices when buying your first bike, especially if you're a beginner watching this video.
Yes, don't do what I did. Start on something smaller.
Yeah.
It's cheaper and you'll learn more.
We're gonna go grab some food. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
Deuces.